Have you ever worried that you might be the cool kid? You wear the latest fashions on top of all the trends? Or have you ever worried you were too much in the mainstream? Always so generic, more normal than your friends? Well, we've devised a test to put to rest your fears. There's no need to panic if you lend us your ears. Tonight you can't sleep easy after all that you've heard. Cause if you like the show, then you're probably a nerd. Oh, canon, it's all. With the one and only Boris. So canon, it's all. In canon.
Hello, everyone. Hello. This is a new day, a new episode. As always, I am your host. I am Boris. And I am joined by Phil.
Hey, everybody.
And making his triumphant return to the It's Canon podcast is Tyler.
You couldn't keep me away!
That's basically it. I tried hard. I really did.
Yep.
So,
I live in the same city, and there's a pandemic, and I was still outside Boris's window.
exactly. Knocking on my door, saying, "Can we record?"
Just waiting.
I said yes.
At least it was on the other side of the window, so you were observing social distancing.
Yeah. Well, look, I am a lunatic, not an anarchist.
Exactly. All right. It is the It's Canon podcast. It's the show where we talk about all things, everything. And guys, do you know what the best part of it all is?
It's all in canon.
Kyle read all the Marvel comics.
You know, it's hilarious they even say that. So, Phil, in the original incarnation of the show, we had an episode where we would always, or every episode the second half, we would dedicate to comic books and giving our thoughts and, getting into non-spoilery reviews of the comics. And this one episode, Kyle, during prep, was like, guys, I did it. I read all the comics. I'm ready. You can ask me anything. I'll be able to talk about everything, yada, yada, yada. When it came time to actually record, and I was going down the list of all of the comics, I'm like, hey, did you read this? Kyle, no. Next title, Kyle, no. Next title, Kyle, no. It came to the point where I'm like, what the fuck did you actually read? And yeah, he ended up reading like 5 books maximum.
No, he read the wrong week. He read like 5 books from that week, and so I'd read the entire previous week thinking he had it. But it was just like, oh, god damn it.
Yeah, it was the most ridiculous thing. It was great. So, for those of you who don't know, Tyler used to be on the show more regularly. Life took over. He grew up, took real big boy jobs, and essentially, I couldn't pay him shit. So, he decided to take a little break from the podcast as the podcast took its break on its own. And, it's one of those things where, I really, to be honest, I wanted to bring Tyler back at some point. I wanted Tyler to be part of this, but it's kind of like zero commitment, up to you whenever you want to show up. And, it's all on you at this point. So, a little bit of peer pressure now that I put it out there. But, I really wanted you to come back. So I'm really happy that you are back. And, it's kind of cool that we're bringing in the new incarnation with the old incarnation. All we need is Kyle. But, the It's Canon podcast family is obviously, back. We're stronger than ever. And it's going to be a fun ride. So, Tyler, for all of our new listeners, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so last time I was on the show, I think I had like just taken the job. I manage the Milton location of The Dragon, which is an Eisner and many other award-winning comic book shop. The first location's been around in Canada for like 20 years at this point. So in comic book shop years, it's a dinosaur. It keeps going from strength to strength. And despite the pandemic, like, we're still running. I'm still there 3 days a week doing deliveries and stuff. And then in my own time, I am a writer and game designer. I've put out a metric ton of titles since we last talked. And I have another Kickstarter starting up in June 15th, which is going to be marrying Shadow of Colossus and God of War with Dungeons and Dragons. So if you ever wanted to fight a monster the size of a city, that's where you're going to be able to do it.
You know, it's one of those things, I know we've talked about this many times, but we really need to do a special show where we actually play one of your games.
Oh, man, that would be fun.
Phil, you down?
I think that would be great.
Awesome.
These games already are turning me on, so.
Like, chubby on or just turning you on?
Just intellectually at this point, but it depends on the content.
I was going to say, ¿por qué no lo dos?
There you go. Awesome. So, yeah. I know we talked about it so much, but we should actually do it, especially now that, we have time. And Tyler, you will be happy to hear I will not be traveling at least until January, so I am bored, I am stuck, hence the podcast is back.
I mean, it's been super weird. One of the hiccups and the increase in me having to take more distance from the podcast was the fact that summer has become con season for me. I go to Gen Con and Origins every year. I usually try to hit some other ones as well. And between prepping for those and going to them, and like at Gen Con last year, I was doing 18-hour days for like 5 days. So by the time I got back, I'm then doing catch up on everything else. It was just like I had my summer was practically just eaten by con season.
Yeah.
And now they're all canceled.
Right. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a future episode. It is a huge subject that I do want to talk about. It's and we touched it already about, where some cons could go in terms of a virtual type thing, especially, San Diego Comic-Con, where a lot of exhibitors kind of want it, like Marvel, DC. Well, Marvel doesn't even show up there anymore, but, where they kind of do their huge announcements for the year, sneak previews and things like that. So they're kind of doing like virtual con type thing where they're still going to be able to do their thing. San Diego Comic-Con will still be able to, get a lot of endorsements and things like that, through selling access. But, kind of the evolving con and, because there's nothing better than being stuck in a room with thousands of comic book fans and social media fans, or pop culture fans.
There you go.
Yeah, but you know what? That's going to have to be the trend now. They're setting it up, obviously, with all this pandemic stuff. But you look at E3 and everything as well. It's been going more and more digital or virtual in its iterations, and it's being forced to do that now. I think, there are some opportunities for companies, just like Kyle had mentioned, with his
Tyler.
comic book, Tyler said about his comic book store and staying ahead of it, right? You have to adapt in the industry, and those who adapt get to stick around a lot longer.
You can't hear that. I'm actually laughing right now. Well, you can't hear it now. I used to always call Tyler Kyle Tyler. So the fact that Kyle isn't even on the show right now,
I apologize.
the fact that Kyle isn't even, he I don't even know where he is right now. The fact that you called Tyler Kyle just kills me on so many levels.
Oh, it got me again. Yeah, I think it's a good point though, Phil, right? It's like how do you pivot and change things in this time? And some companies can do it, and some companies, even if you want to, like it's harder, right? Like Marvel movies / Disney, like let's call a spade is going to be fine. And video game companies are in a much better position. And I mean, if you look at hiring data, like they're hiring like gangbusters.
Yeah.
But you look at.
But even in the comic book space, like there's games, there's books, there's so many opportunities to pivot your business, and some comic book shops don't do it, and they die.
Yeah,
and then you look at the guys who know their market, like you obviously do. It's a real asset.
Oh yeah, and I'm more speaking to agreed entirely, and there are easier and harder positions to do it in. Right, like we've found board game sales are through the roof right now.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah. And, with the pandemic going on, Ontario is slowly opening up to be closed shortly. How has business changed for you? You mentioned that you go into the shop 3 times a week to do deliveries. Talk about this brave new world and kind of how you've been doing business.
Yeah, so we had an online store and we did have mail order before this. So we were in a really good position already. Looking at, I mean, we have 3 locations, and I do a little bit of work for kind of the company as a whole, but my focus is very much on my location. And we took this as an opportunity. Like, we closed down entirely for April because Diamond wasn't shipping and we weren't getting new product, and it was just like, what are we gonna do? And we had a skeleton staff. I took a vacation. The owner was like, "Do you need to work?" And I was like, "I can take some time." So, we were doing deliveries and stuff, and we've been slowly ratcheting back up as everyone's kind of settled in for the duration, understanding what this is going to be. So, yeah, I'm in 3 days a week right now. Diamond started shipping again this week. Diamond started shipping again this week, and then my entire shipment got lost somewhere, which has been a delight.
Classic Diamond at that point.
Here, it's hilarious, but yeah, it's been a matter of like, I do a lot of board game stuff, and I do a lot of stuff on the computer right now. Like, it's a lot more like an office job than it used to be.
Right, that makes total sense. And that was the latest I've ever probably done on this show, and it's really bothering me, but that's okay. Sorry, complete random thought as I'm, trying to figure out this new setup that we have now, a mixing board and all this and that, all digital, so it's fun. So sorry about that. So Diamond, Diamond being Diamond, has this whole DC controversy kind of changed how you do your ordering and whatnot? Can you even talk about that?
Give me a second. I'm just thinking over what I can and can't talk about. So we did pivot when Diamond was going through. I'm brain farting on who our distributor was, but we got it from the other distributor.
Yeah.
And, it's been a matter of all of comics and graphic novels. And I'm not talking about any of the supporting industries right now. Just specifically comics and graphic novels have definitely been in a strange spot of titles getting delayed.
Yeah.
Your title was supposed to show up, and it's not in stores, and who knows what's happening. So when you look at the official Diamond response, it isn't the direction I would have chosen.
Mm-hmm.
But we can hope for the best anyways.
Right. So that is pretty, that sounds about right. Unfortunately, Diamond was in a very comfortable situation. They took advantage of an industry that was hurting at the time. They signed these deals that would never have, seen the light of day if the industry wasn't where it was 25 years ago. But they were able to capitalize on that, and good on them. But so they've kind of never been forced to, improve, be best. They've been lucky to be the only distributor for a lot of these comic book companies to comic book stores. So now that there is competition, however that competition was created, that that's a story for another day. But there's competition now. Diamond needs to step up, and unfortunately, they're kind of saying, "But we've been around for so long. Why are you upset with us?" So, I'm going to leave it there. I don't want you to get in trouble. But it's just an interesting kind of dynamic that's going on. And unfortunately, for years we've been talking about this. Though even 5 years ago when we started the show, we were talking about, that these contracts with Diamond are due up. And, with DC being owned by AT&T now, not even WB, we're talking like, the Grand Poobah, and Marvel being owned by Disney, they have their own business plans. They have their own means of distribution that I'm sure they're going to take advantage of, and DC already has, and it'll be interesting to see where Disney goes with this.
I mean, Marvel Disney has as well, for sure, as well. Like, we already get a bunch of our Marvel kids books are not through Diamond.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
And they are, you look at them, and a lot of people would say that's a comic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, yeah, as we've talked about, Disney's paper publishing arm is bigger than Diamond.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't even know what's going to happen, especially with the pandemic right now.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
And that's an episode that we're going to obviously talk about, and I love kind of bringing in these sneak peeks, but I'm a huge numbers nerd. I'm a huge nerd in general, and I just love talking about the business of things. For those listeners who are a little newer, we used to go in depth about the actual comic business, and that's one of the things that a lot of creators loved about us, is that we would talk more than just talk about your characters and, your inspiration, things like that. We actually went in depth into the business side of things, into the creation side of things. Sometimes we would even talk about money with certain creators in terms of how much they had to raise for, getting their book into the Image brand and things like that. So, it's one of those things that we will be talking about, and Tyler, I'm going to lean on you as much as humanly possible, but, obviously I don't want you to get in trouble, so we're going to talk a little bit more about this down the road. Phil, do you have any thoughts about that, just kind of hearing what we were talking about? I know that this is a subject that you and I haven't really talked about on the show, as the show is expanding outside of just comics and whatnot. So, in terms, and I know that, you're kind of on and hot and cold in terms of just reading comics in general. But any thoughts come to mind as we kind of chat?
Oh yeah, like lifelong comic book fan here, but mostly my younger years. It's a fascinating angle to talk about, because understanding the economics of an industry, especially an industry like this, can tell you a lot about what the type of content you're going to get and what type of struggles people are having to get their own stuff out on their own terms. Like I say in the previous episode, I mentioned my friend Steve Gilbert writes Colville, self-publishes. It's a lot of challenges, right? He owns his own store, and he's got a place that he can put his foot into the industry. But when you look at these big distributors and the fact that they have these monopolies, it's interesting to see that there's competition now, and to get into that side of the business.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting conversation for sure. The other kind of thing I want to touch on very quickly is Kickstarter and Patreon, and hopefully comic creators never open in OnlyFans, but how Kickstarter and Patreon kind of changed the industry even 5 years ago and where it is today. So I don't want to touch on that right now, but that's for sure a conversation that we will be having down the road. And I saw that, Phil, you almost actually spit out your coffee when I said that.
Yeah, the OnlyFans was pretty funny.
There are people doing it.
Yeah, I know.
I don't doubt it. Like, revenue is revenue, and I guess if you can go there and do that, I know I see a lot of that stuff, especially with Patreon and whatnot right now. When you look at some of the online vlogs or whatever you want to call them, and they've gotten broken up, and the individuals have gone out and started their own, as well as some of the Lego guys are now doing, because of the changes that YouTube have made to their pay policy on videos. And
that's a huge one.
They've had to go out and start looking at Patreon and basically getting subscribers that way, and creating content specifically for them. I've seen one guy, Jang Bricks, his channel has changed drastically, not in a negative way, but people buy him sets to build, multiples of them, for him to build and review now. And I think that's surprising him, is just how willing people are in the community to support what they love.
Oh, 100%. And on the other side of that is, you look back at the early days of webcomics, where you had Brad Geiger, who is like literally one of the guys who wrote the How to Make Webcomics book. And he was doing, the old-fashioned thing of you had it up and you gave it out for free. And I think one of his main series is 100% behind paywall on Patreon now.
Yeah, makes sense.
And he makes money off of it, and then collects and sells the graphic novels, so you can be a Patreon subscriber and get it as you go, or you can buy the graphic novel.
But that's exactly it. Like, content is content. I think a lot of people have now learned how important IP is, at the end of the day, for consumers to consume said content, that people are willing to pay for it if it's good, which is why we haven't reopened our Patreon just yet. But if it's worth it, people will shell out money for it. At the same time, you still have dirtbags and pieces of trash who will try to take advantage of the whole Patreon thing, on both sides, both on the creator side and on the consumer side. So it's, there's a lot of topics that we can chat about.
I'm also curious about one thing here, a topic that I don't know gets discussed much with this type of situation with Patreon and whatnot. I worry about sometimes the content being too curtailed for the audience. It's like screaming down a self-made well, you know what I mean? And it doesn't limit the artist or the creativity of it by curtailing so much of your content for that specific audience.
It's interesting. I mean, there was a essay, I don't know when it was. I think it was back in like 2007, and it was the 1,000 True Fans essay, and it was arguing that more people are going to be less famous. And, instead of having your Hickmans who sell tens and tens of thousands of comics at, what is it, like $6 a comic in Canada now?
Yeah.
You'd be able to have 1,000 people that give you $10 a month, and you would end up making more money.
Yeah.
So you're making more money by more committed, fewer fans. And anecdotally, my own business, I have had a lot more success targeting a narrow, excited group and knowing that I am giving them exactly what they want than trying to go wide. And that doesn't mean I don't try to do stuff that has more mainstream appeal ever. It's just, I think that both have their place.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense in that, circle. And again, that's getting really deep into the numbers because, we can talk about stats, we can talk about the analytics, we can talk about, the numbers game, what direction makes sense the most. But yeah, it's for sure a subject that I really want to jump into. Short story long, Tyler, I'm super glad that you are back. I'm super glad that you were able to join us. And, you're going to be jumping in and out as, life and time permits. Welcome back. Thanks. And, I'm personally, again, happy to have you back. Silence.
Yeah, it's been good. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I know. And Phil.
Well, I'm excited as well to work with you, Tyler. So, it seems like you have a lot of great insights into a lot of different stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Let's not get carried away. Phil, what have you been up to the past week or so? I guess it's been a week since we last talked.
Oh, Animal Crossing. I farmed.
God.
That's my weekly update on Animal Crossing. It's probably the most grindy game I've ever seen, and yet the world seems to be playing it. I finished the Division 2 and the expansion, and I have been watching Upload, I think, on a topic that we'll talk about later.
Yes.
So I kind of got my arm twisted into that and fell into that trap. So that's been my geek week.
Yeah, Animal Crossing. I judge you so much on that one.
I can't even. I don't understand what's going on, but people are having talk shows on it. It's you log in, you spend 40 minutes. It's really not much of a time commitment, but I just can't believe how much it reminds me of the stuff I hated in Destiny and Destiny 2 and all these other games and WoW and everything else that I played over my life, where you just are grinding so much. Like, you log in, here's your dailies, here's this. It's a way less direct way of coercing the player into doing this. And I find that a fascinating study from a player standpoint, like how they're motivating people to do what they want them to do.
Yeah. Makes sense. So,
and I'm sure Tyler has an idea about what I'm talking about. I don't know if you've touched that game or even looked at it, but it's fascinating.
I lucked out in that I had a bunch of other games that I've been waiting for. So I've threaded that needle of not picking it up or playing it. And for the very reason you're talking about, I am terrified of playing it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm terrified of, like, no, that's my life now.
Yeah. It's quite literally, I was saying to Boris, I'm pretty sure I could give you a weekly update every week on this chat that will be exactly the same for the rest of my life. Yeah, I fished.
Caught all the fish.
I hit
now
rocks.
hunting bugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god, I just can't with that game.
Hey, you're watching reality TV here, so
Yeah, it's your judgment. Whatever. Go Vanderpump Rules. Go Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I'm all up in that shit right now. As Tyler judges me.
I have my now wife back during the show is my partner. My now wife watches a lot of reality TV, so I have tangentially watched The Circle.
Ah, yes.
And that Too Hot to Handle.
I've luckily avoided that one.
A lot of Bake Off.
Yeah. Reality TV is a hell of a thing, and we're going to be talking about that very shortly, and kind of consequences of assholes when it pertains to certain things. Mm-hmm. So that's a little teaser for later on in the show. So I've been watching a lot of reality TV. I've been I spent a lot of the week fixing my setup. Before we move on, I do want to apologize to our listeners that the last special episode, sound quality wasn't the best. And I'm going to be 100% honest when I say I just gave up editing. The sound was just pissing me off so much. Much to, Mike did a great job during the interview, and I will try to fix up the actual interview as best as possible, put that out on our feed so that people can listen to that, but the parts that involved just Phil and I just sounded horrible. Horrible internet connection, shitty day, bad mood, I don't know what it was, the trolls.
We were using a new app too. Let's not forget the fact
ridiculous.
That we had to be a little agile there.
Fuck you, Zoom. It was just a headache on so many levels that I just gave up in the middle of editing. I said, fuck it, releasing the episode. And I know that there were parts that probably should have been edited out, but that's the beauty of I guess, I'm just trying to make excuses at this point. But I do want to apologize, because I am a huge I'm very
picky,
that's the word.
Perfectionist.
Perfection. I was going to use another word, but I didn't want to say
Obsessive.
it. Anyway, yes. Tyler, you know how I used to be, and it's gotten so much worse now that I have too much time on my hands. So anyways, I spent all week trying to find a mixer. I don't want a physical mixer just yet. I am still staying at my parents' while the world is frozen outside. But I needed something to have the podcast sound better. There's nothing worse than putting on a podcast that I love to listen to and hearing breakups and static and the sound just being horrible. If I have to constantly be changing the volume on an episode of a podcast, I will turn it off. So that's what started my obsession with sound quality on the show, and I've just luckily found a great app program on my PC that I've been using, and we can get hopefully better sounding podcasts for our listeners, because at the end of the day, this podcast, I just want people to spend their hour and a half, 2 hours listening to us, agreeing, disagreeing, swearing at us, whatever it is you want to do, and just forget about real life, forget about shit that's going on, and just listen to us randomly talk about random subjects and whatnot, So, yeah. What else have I done this week? I've done a lot of work for the site. I cleaned up the site a little bit. It was needed some TLC on the actual site. I didn't really watch too much per se. I feel like I watched something. I just don't remember what it was, so that's how memorable it was. I spent Friday... Oh, actually, I guess on Friday night, I spent watching all of the Purge movies, and I started the TV shows. That's basically it. And then just kind of yesterday again, doing some TLC on the site, on the show, getting the script ready for, the outline for today's show. And that's when, I couldn't sleep. So at like 5 in the morning, I was thinking, it would be really cool. And we're going to talk about on the air, because why not do business on the air? And it's kind of like a YouTube video behind the scenes on the making of a podcast. That's something that I'm thinking I want to do, because there's a lot that goes on behind a podcast. I've been asked by friends, coworkers, strangers, lovers, how do you get a podcast out? So kind of like, from ideas to outline to actually recording, and kind of walk you through what a typical week in the It's Canon podcast world looks like. So that's something that I am thinking of doing. We'll talk about that more offline, guys, but that's just something that's out there. Outside of that, it's kind of been all the same for me. Having said that, I think it's time that we should probably move on to some other subjects. So before we do move on, I do want to, give a bit of a warning. Some of the subjects that we do talk about in today's episode might be a little tough, a little heavy, a little more involved, a little more adult for some of our listeners. So if you do, listen to the show with a little one, this is your warning. There are going to be adult subjects. So, I don't want to get a shit ton of emails complaining, things like that right now. This is your warning, but I feel like some of these subjects we should be talking about. I feel like these are the subjects that should be talked about out in the open by podcasts and people and, whomever. But, we tend to kind of keep these subjects in a Pandora's box. But I'm going to open up Pandora's box a little bit. We're going to have a good, real conversation about a few things. But yes, parents, if, you are sensitive to what your child listens to, the next little bit you might want to skip. I will try to add some, I guess you won't know, but I'm going to try to add some notes into the episode notes, as to what we're going to be talking about and where these certain subjects lie. But yeah, I just want to give that warning out there before we move forward. And then as we chat about stuff, and before we chat about stuff, Phil.
Hey, I just want everybody to check out www.itscanonpodcast.com. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at It's Canon Podcast. Email show@itscanonpodcast.com. Subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, really anywhere you find one of these podcast apps. And if you like what you hear, be sure to click the subscribe button, because that's the way that that you're going to get notified that we're doing this. And we really want to thank all of our listeners for taking the time to listen to us. And let's get on to the controversial topics.
Yeah, so Tyler, anything before we start?
I just wanted to say that Phil does that better than I ever did. I remember having to do that, and like 50% of the time, Boris would throw to me, and I'd be like, I don't remember what social media is. What's happening here?
That's been my last 3 weeks, actually.
Oh yeah, how terrifying it is. Boris throws to you, and you know it. It's like being a kid again, and you're in class, and then the teacher's like, "All right, we're gonna take turns reading a paragraph," and you're like, "You're not listening to anyone." You're like, "Which paragraph's mine?" Okay. Where am I going? All right, paragraph 4. All right. Okay, I'm ready. And then it happens to you, and you're like, "I don't know how to read."
Yeah, what's that word? Oh man,
you guys need to produce an episode and see how much
better
pressure
than a little
I
bit
feel.
of pressure.
Oh my god. All right. So, I guess the first subject of today is going to be toxic fandoms. The toxic culture that we live in, and kind of what we're just gonna have an honest discussion. What really inspired this subject is something that happened on Friday night. When this actually happened, I thought it was only going to stay contained in the small little world of professional wrestling and not really blow up. And I'm seeing CTV articles, variety articles, other mainstream outlets picking the story up. And I guess because it does have that reality show element to it. People outside of the wrestling community actually care about it. But I do want to bring this up, and I do want to talk about it a little bit, and kind of, what inspired this for me. And it is the sad death of a professional wrestler out in Japan, Hana Kimura, 22 years old. Absolutely tragic, what happened. So, to give everyone a little bit of the story, essentially, Hana Kimura was a part of the reality show The Terrorists in Japan. It is a Netflix show. They are not recording right now, as no one is really recording right now, but before the pandemic hit, she was a part of the show. And, she got upset with one of the house guests. And basically, Terrace House is a show kind of like Big Brother, kind of like The Real World, where you have 6 adults living in this house and see what bullshit they can get up to, what crazy adventures they can get up to. And really, like a lot of reality shows, it's about the drama, it's about the fights, it's about, the gossip, and really it brings out the worst in humanity. But we kind of like watching it. It's kind of like watching gladiators go at it for me. When you actually sit down and think about it, a lot of these reality shows are meant to trigger not only the people in the show but your emotions as you're watching it. So Hana Kimura, she was a professional wrestler out in Japan for a all women's promotion known as Stardom. This female promotion was featured this year at the Tokyo Dome, January 4th, mega show for the first time. And Hana Kimura was one of the wrestlers that put on a all women's match at Wrestle Kingdom in Japan at this show. And essentially, the ring gear that she wore for that show was near and dear to her heart. Fast forward to this reality show. For whatever reason, this wrestling gear was left in the washing machine. One of the other house guests put in their load, didn't check or whatever, if anything was there. Eventually ended up ruining the wrestling gear. And Hana Kimura, had a freak down on this episode. Ended up slapping the hat off of this other house guest. And obviously, this is all heavily edited. We don't know what the conversation actually entailed, but for the viewers, the Hana Kimura was, an angry person who freaked out for clothes getting ruined. And yeah, Tyler?
I was just saying, I just want to jump in for a second on that, just to have a little bit extra context. I'm not saying it happens on this show, but several people who have worked on reality television have talked about how it's not uncommon that if you are, quote, cast in a reality television show, regularly when you're on filming, you are overtired, you are starving, and a lot of the time they refuse you food, but give you all the liquor you want. So that they are, and again, not saying this show, but in a lot of shows like this, they are very much setting you up for an emotional breakdown. Like they are,
they're pushing buttons.
Yeah,
Yep.
They have all the levers.
Yep.
And they're like, well, you can't eat, so you're starving, and you usually are overtired, and those already make you, as no one's above this. You become more emotional, and it happens, and then you're half bombed. So,
Yep.
And then just to interject here too.
Go ahead.
I think a lot of these people, when they go on these reality shows, they see it as an opportunity to self-promote and get their brand out there. But depending on how the editing's done, you can be cast as a villain. You can be cast as a good guy. My understanding is she was getting cast as a villain. I don't know that was by her choice.
Exactly.
that's a very
she's
good point.
living the consequences of a decision made by someone else as far as how they're portraying her.
Exactly.
Because, as we all know, editing is huge.
And that was
Yeah,
one
there
of the
was a
things I was going to talk about was the actual editing, and that's exactly where I was going, Phil. So thanks for bringing that up. Just as a complete sidebar before we get back to this story, I was reading. I forgot what I was reading. It was somewhere on Twitter, and it linked me to an article about some controversy right now in Vanderpump Rules, where one of the editors went on a podcast, spilled the beans, even said that I go out of my way of making this character look like an idiot. This is, what I've been told to do. This is what I want to do. So this editor ended up getting shit canned, obviously, because she named names, she talk. She kind of NDAs are a hell of a thing, but
Yeah, I was going to say, don't violate those NDAs.
yeah, the editing is a huge thing. So Hana Kimura, on top of it all, from all accounts, from other professional wrestlers, from people all around the world that have encountered her, say she's such a sweetheart, how nice of a person she was. So, all of this editing and the portrayal of people in reality shows really comes into question. Yeah, she freaks out on this castmate, and after this episode aired in Japan, she started getting cyber bullied. The fans of this show and some wrestling fans who, it's still real to them, damn it, just went a little too far, and they kept cyberbullying her and kept going and kept going and kept going. So Friday evening, Saturday morning, local Japan time, on her Twitter feed, she posted some self-harm pictures with very cryptic messages, and some wrestlers on this side of the world tried getting her help, but unfortunately they didn't get her the help fast enough, and she ended up passing away. So, because of this toxic fandom, because of these hate messages, she just felt horrible. She felt to the point where she couldn't continue. 22 years old, and she ended up committing suicide, and we lost someone because of all of these consequences, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking. So this really inspired me to talk about toxic fandom and negativity and social media and reality TV, and kind of like, those things that a lot of people think about but don't really talk about. And I feel like, in these shows we really need to bring this stuff up, because we are living in a society where we just thrive on negativity, and it's absolute bullshit that we are all so negative people. If you don't like something, don't watch it. Let other people enjoy it. Other people will consume it. Other people will enjoy it. Let the executives and the powers that be decide on what they want to do if something is not good, if something didn't make the money. But if you're watching something simply to hate it, you're doing it wrong. If you're literally going on a Twitter rant about someone, think about that person. These people have their own lives. These people have their families. These people have, they are human beings, and you are being absolute pieces of trash to each other. Like, these are the consequences. I hope that anyone who sent one of these messages to Hana Kimura feel like absolute trash that she did this. And it's an absolute disaster that, the only reason why we're talking about this is because someone took their own life. It's absolute bullshit, and it gets to me so much. Toxic fandom, it is literally the worst thing, but it is, it's so inspired by our society now. People thrive on it. People want it. And Twitter is the absolute worst for it, because people feel entitled to their opinion and making you feel like shit. Why? Because you can hide behind a keyboard. You can hide behind, anything. You are basically as anonymous as you want to be. And I hope that the authorities do everything in their power to shit on and smash these people who sent her any disparaging messages. It's I get very worked up talking about this, because as Phil, as Tyler, I may have mentioned this when we were doing the shows about 10 years ago. Phil and I were running a local soccer club, and that was built on fandom. And I was the president. There was a group of people who didn't want me to be, so they took it upon themselves to make my life absolute shit. I've been targeted at this. I there's something that I don't necessarily admit to a lot of people, but I will admit it here because this is a subject that we are talking about, and just so that people understand, there were nights that I was literally drinking myself silly, staring at a wall, thinking, "What the fuck is this all for?" It's fucking absolutely horrible. I even got to that point. Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like, to be on the other side of that equation, to be the subject of that kind of harassment is so surreal and othering because, I think a lot of people want to believe the best in other humans, and you just get stuck in this terrible place. You're like, well, so many people are upset at me, and I don't understand really why. Right? And you just kind of get in this position of like, you don't know how to get out of that thought spiral.
Yeah.
Because there's they've chosen to hate you.
Yep.
And you're sitting there like trying to figure out like, well, I feel like we should be able to talk this out, right? To use your football club example, it's a football club.
Yeah.
They don't have to agree with everything you're doing, but like, at what point does it become acceptable to, call a freaking claim that you're making a bomb threat or whatever this swatting bullshit is?
Yeah, I'm not trying to turn this into a woe is me type thing. It was just an example. But, because I can relate. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. And
yeah, I think anybody who's done some public service or anything, you can be targeted. You can even have it at work, this type of thing, and people shouldn't be doing it. But that being said, I'm going to take a realist side here with her. It's not necessarily the way I feel, but I think it's going to spur some discussion here that's worth having. She was a lot sicker than just the cyberbullies. Obviously, she needed help because, no matter what's going on there, I don't think, I don't know of how many messages when you start having those thoughts, then maybe you should get help, and it's such a sad thing for her because she's ultimately lost her life over this, and the compassion is all there for her from me. I don't want to sound cold. I'm just saying, though, I wish that she would have got help.
Yeah.
I mean,
I really do.
But that's also one of the things. It's like we do not know what the person on the other side feels, what they're going through, Sometimes it's those happiest people who have those demons in their closet, and but at the end of the day, these toxic pieces of shit don't care. They just want to make you feel like crap.
Her seeking help, my suggestion of her seeking help does not negate the fact that people shouldn't be treating each other like this. All right? There's civility in this world. We've seen it in Star Wars. We've seen it everywhere where fans go and pursue characters to the point, like, these are real people, and they have to start removing their Instagrams. They have to start removing their Twitter feeds because of the toxic fandom. And it's just absolutely upsetting to see all of these people having to deal with this on a regular basis, and how people are so entitled to go and attack like this.
Yeah.
To push. Go for it, Boris.
I was just going to say, I know exactly where you were going with the whole seek help thing. Is, if you're not feeling well, if, you're having these types of thoughts, just go and talk to someone. People will be there willing to listen to you. I know it's so much harder said than done. I know, and I understand, and, I feel it. But at the same time, you just go and try to seek the help before it gets too much. Because, having a mountain of people attacking you constantly, attacking the very fabric of your being, can get overwhelming. But, this is why it's so important to talk about how you're feeling to other people. I know that there are people who just kind of break down, close themselves off. Check up on your friends, check up on people, have these conversations, be open about it. That's what I'm trying to get to at this point as well. And Phil, with your comment, that's kind of it. Like, just be nice to each other, talk to each other, have these conversations. Don't let these toxic pieces of shit get to you. So go ahead, Tyler.
But sorry, Tyler, go for it.
I mean, I was going to say, to push back a little bit, and I agree with you entirely that, ideally people are able to get the help they want or need, but we're in the middle of what's already a crazy stressful baseline.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this to sound dismissive, but like, literally, how do you get help right now?
Yeah.
Even culturally, I don't know, like what kind of challenges are in Japan in particular, where she's based. I know that there's challenges here, exactly, or in her career. I'm not trying. I'm just trying to put that out there for people.
Oh yeah.
Understand if you're in this situation where you're getting hate online and cyberbullying, and you're having these thoughts, try to seek help. I don't know how that works today. It's a very valid point, Tyler. That getting a hold of a regular doctor is almost impossible, let alone a mental health specialist. You know what I mean? But there are crisis lines. There are things there in our society that, as far as I know, haven't shut down. And they need
some have, some haven't. It's a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Yeah. I feel for people, like maybe just take a time out. And it's easier said than done in hindsight. I'm just saying,
I think
I'll even go as far as to say, like, there's some culpability on Netflix's production side.
Oh gosh, Netflix makes some decisions. I mean,
that's exactly where I was.
We're
going.
now getting into.
Go.
Am I going now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we were both going the same direction. I think that there's a lot of big businesses that very much profit, and they're doing just fine from toxic fandom because
I'll bet you the ratings of that show are up.
Yeah, the ratings of that show are up.
Sure.
And the other side of it is, I am not putting on the conspiracy theorist hat on this one, but let's say you were making Sonic. You got a bunch of free advertising by having a really bad Sonic design. I'm not saying they did it. I'm saying that is what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they seem to have no problem throwing people under the bus.
Yeah. I know some people who, before yesterday, had no idea what this show was, that it even existed. Now it seems to be the show that a lot of people are talking about. So, at the end of the day, unfortunately, you are correct that they did get a lot of free advertisement. And the saddest part about all of this is that they probably are being watched by more people than ever.
Oh, I can almost guarantee it, because it seems to happen a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with Tyler here, where I wouldn't put it as something that they wanted to have happen, and I'm sure they've issued many a statement to express their condolences and their shock about her passing, and rightfully so, and I'm sure they're all good people, but I just, really in a meta way, I'm just questioning a lot of this reality TV. Is it good for us? Is going on Twitter and bullying people and venting about just some unreal topics? Like, you think about where society was in the 80s and the 70s and different times. These things weren't exploited to this degree, or at least as public as they are. I'm sure there's mean people always exist. I get it. Mean people suck.
Yeah,
but,
you could probably get threatening letters and things like that, but I think it's just a direct access and how quick you can actually get out there and send a tweet to someone and be anonymous about it and not worry about the consequences. You just literally be a keyboard warrior, type whatever you feel, go fuck yourself, blah, 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 blah. And the person gets that response. We have access to, celebrities and, and stars and, people like that. Direct access to them, the type of access that we've never really had, So there's a level of technology changing us into being able to do this. There's that, like I mentioned, the anonymity of it all as well. But I feel like a lot of this is just, we evolved and we changed and we added all this technology to society, but we never really took a step back and thought about, like, hey, we should probably teach people about this a little more. We should probably tell people not to.
Should we do it?
Yeah, should we do it? Or even, hey, how about we teach people not to be pieces of trash? Or, hey, this is what you don't do using Twitter and whatnot. It's kind of been a free-for-all and with zero consequences. And, this is where I don't want regulation. I don't want oversight in the sense of censorship. But I do feel like there is a level of, of Overwatch that is required. Of humanity, of education, as a, children. We should teach them at a young age not to be dipshits, especially online. One thing is face-to-face. One thing I will say about, my experiences in this, and Phil knows exactly where I'm going to go, is that I was called Hitler, I was called a Nazi, I was called a piece of trash, I was called a spick, I was called a wetback, I was called so many things. And I knew who was calling me this. But did these people ever say any of that to my face? No. A lot of these people don't have the balls to say some of this stuff face to face to someone. So, if we can instill some of these traits into people where don't say something online that you wouldn't say to someone's face, we would be avoiding so much more. But I feel like, this current generation where we're at, it's, you can't teach an old dog a new trick. So we need to find ways to combat this as us good people, as non keyboard warriors. But, we need more education at the core of it all. We need... Go ahead.
I actually disagree on that being the solution.
Well,
I think that saying that it's just people not being educated well enough or not knowing any better misses an integral part of the equation. I mean, I'm going to try not to go into the specific politics of it, but I think we need to accept that there is a very, very heavy overlap between certain segments of toxic fandom and certain political ideologies.
Yeah.
And in researching this episode, it took me 60 seconds of searching to accidentally end up on stuff that had nothing to do with actual fandom.
Yeah.
And I think that, it would be nice to have people stop being bad.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be, that's an ideal that, I'd love to get towards it. But I think that short term, I do think we actually need to re-examine and specifically there needs to be some examination on how not even new laws, but laws we already have on the books are enforced. I think that, frickin' calling in a bomb threat so someone gets hit by a SWAT team, that should be illegal.
Yeah,
and I know that it's the extreme, but I think that's a good idea. I think we'd all agree, I think most of us can agree, that if you call a SWAT team on, let's say famous person John Smith, and you're like, he has a bomb, and the SWAT team shows up and kills him, I think you're partly responsible.
Yeah, for sure. And so basically you're saying is that, we need to, number one, enforce laws that already exist. Number two, reevaluate and see how these laws can be reworked to kind of cover more examples of this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, not even necessarily changing the laws, but changing the enforcement mechanism. I mean, I think that I think there's a lot of laws already on the book in both Canada and the United States specifically that you could compel Facebook and Twitter, because let's call a spade, those are two of the biggest ones where toxic fandom happens. Other places as well, but those two especially, you could very easily use laws already on the books to compel them to change their behavior. If you're calling for violence against a person or a type of people or whatever, under Canadian law, that's definitely a civil case, if not a criminal case.
Right.
And the reticence towards infringing on that, I think, is a mistake.
Right. I agree. I guess we're tackling this in two different ways. I'm kind of looking more at, the societal person-to-person type thing. You're looking at the overarching, I guess, policing of side of things, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I'm also carefully sectioning off the most extreme for the moment, in part because I think that, saying someone should be the victim of horrible, brutal crimes that's just unreasonable.
Yeah, it makes sense. I get it. I 100% get it. It's, where do we even start? That's the thing. And for me, the simplest solution is, hey, stop being a fucking piece of shit, people. Think about for anyone listening, before you send a message, think about that message before you send it. Why are you sending a hate
it's
message?
just like the email rule. If you're going to write an angry email, don't write it right away, or write it down. Don't send it. Read it a day later.
Yeah.
And that's the type of attitude. But I think the technology is really enabling a lot of really bad behavior. I think the technology moves faster than our moral compasses, than anything, because these challenges are brought on by the immediacy and of the technology to be there, to be anonymous, to be whatever, and I don't know what kind of, I agree with you. I don't want to see it overwrought with guidance and rules and all this stuff that take away the fun, because there's a lot of positive that does come out of that. But it's just people who just really need to check their head, like, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Tyler, any final thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I think we could go on this a lot longer. I think that it's. I think that specifically, I think it's important to point out that these platforms not only, I would argue, both legally and morally, are shirking responsibility they have. But even if you don't buy that assertion from me, I think we can all agree that they benefit from allowing it to happen, if not encouraging toxic fandom. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the more you're engaged, the more money they make. And the angrier you are and the longer you spend fighting with someone in the comments or whatever, that makes them more money. That raises their metrics. And I don't think, even if you don't agree with me that what steps they should take, I think we all need to definitely recognize and reconcile the fact that they make money off of this.
There's that economic reason why I feel like we won't get the proper laws in place. Lobbyists do a wonderful job of protecting things and people. I'm not going to get into... I'm not going to touch some of the subject. But, the NRA comes into mind. That's basically where I'm going to go with that.
The NRA is a fascinating example.
It is. I know.
Because there's only like less than 1 million members or something insane like that. Like, it's actually super small.
Yep. Exactly. It's crazy. Yeah. And I guess where I kind of want to end up is, guys, think before you send a message. We're all humans. Everyone right now, especially right now, is going through a lot more than we usually do. Think that, hey, you're sending a shitty message to someone. There's someone on the other side of that message. They have their own lives. We don't know exactly what they're going through. I don't want to think that anyone's actual point to sending something is for someone to off themselves. But that is one of the consequences. For those of you who are not feeling the best, go and talk to someone. If you're not feeling the best, I'm sure you have someone that you can lean on, that you can talk to, that you feel the confidence in really talking to them about how you're feeling, and you can seek that help. And for everyone else, reach out to your friends. Send them a message, especially right now during the pandemic. Hey, how are you doing? Everything good? How are you feeling? You might be surprised by some of the messages that you actually get back.
Also, if you're the victim of ongoing harassment online, I thoroughly recommend finding someone you trust and care about, but who has some emotional distance from the instance, to give them your social media account while you cool down.
Yep.
They can sit on it for a little bit. It's okay. They can monitor stuff, and you can get someone else that you trust to go through and block some of those people, because you have no obligation to have those people in your life. You have no obligation to give anyone that kind of access to you. I mean, if we're talking about freedom of speech, which is the rallying cry of a lot of the toxic members of fandom, sure, you can say whatever you want, but no one has any obligation to listen to you.
Yeah.
Just like you no obligation to listen to them. So, if you're being harassed, get that emotional distance. Get someone to,
You can ignore
Yeah,
someone in
to
real
give you
life.
perspective, to give you the perspective, right? Like, number one, that person might be able to give you some advice on, just helping you mentally anyway.
Oh
And
yeah.
just saying, like, holy cow, you shouldn't, they'll give you that advice. They'll give you that perspective. I like the idea of giving them the keys to your social media too, to go and do some work on that, because you need to block people. You need to get, and that's not to say that you shouldn't be listening to people who maybe have a legitimate point. We're just talking about this really small segment of toxic fans, right? That are wishing very serious very serious harm to you. It's not cool.
And I'm
Yeah,
not saying...
and when you get that emotional space, it can be hard to unplug and get away, and that's why that's important.
Yeah, especially with this pandemic, and just like you had brought up, we're all feeling trapped. We're all feeling frustrated, and maybe that is a huge contributor here. We don't know what was going through that poor girl's mind, and it's just so sad that it ended up with her losing her life. And I do hope that a lot of people really examine or maybe center those messages, really think about their impact and their contribution to this. It's not a good place to be in as a person. We should be looking to be compassionate to one another, empathetic. Those are the qualities that we need to be exercising the most during this tough time.
I think that's a perfect way to end this segment. I do want to, go back and say, we are not doctors, we're not professionals. We're just human beings talking about a subject. These are our views. This is kind of, it's just a podcast, but, hopefully you can take some of these, points of advice to heart. Disconnect sometimes. Think about before you send a message and whatnot. That's really all we can do as people. But yeah, that's pretty much where we are at this point. And I guess, it's important to also say that, it's just be nice to each other. So that's that. We're going to talk about this in the future, I'm sure, in regards to toxic fandom and just fans in general. And I'd love to have the opportunity to chat with people about this. So let us know, kind of your experiences. Hey, reach out to us if you have to. We're always going to be there for our listeners. We're always going to listen to them the way that they listen to our show. So that's essentially where we are. So before we are going to take a little bit of a break. I need to kind of chill, have a shot of whiskey or something. So when we are back, we're going to talk about Upload, the Amazon TV show. We're going to talk about the afterlife. We're going to talk about, how you plan to spend your afterlife if you had the choice. So stay tuned. We will be right back. And we're back. We needed that break. I needed that break. Phil obviously needed that break.
I needed that break.
Tyler, did you need that break?
I filled an entire pitcher with water and have drank half of it already. So yes.
Well done. Well done, guys. All right. So, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore.
Just a regular day at the office for you then.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. So, it's too many knobs in my face.
Not even going to touch it.
That's what I said. Anyways, you are listening to the It's Canon podcast. We took a break. There was, we just had to. So we're going to continue on with the show. We are going to talk about a new TV show that was released on the Amazon platform here in North America. probably has distribution on God knows what everywhere else, or maybe it's an Amazon exclusive. I don't know how these rights work anymore. But for those of you who have Amazon Prime here in Canada, US, we are going to be talking about a TV show called Upload. Tyler, what would you call the genre of this TV show?
It is transhumanism. Take two. It is transhumanist-inspired science fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. So
transhumanist light.
Yes, with yes, it is.
Let's just call it also a comedy or a drama.
It's Greg Daniels,
Yeah.
Creator of The Office, Parks and Rec. It's Greg Daniels. Like you know it's gonna be funny, but there were some heavy elements into it. So just to give everyone sort of a. We're not going to go into deep spoilers. We're just going to kind of give you the highlights of what the show's about, and then we're going to talk about a few things. So in the show takes place in 2033. Humans are able to upload themselves into a virtual reality afterlife of their choosing. When a computer programmer, Nathan, dies prematurely, he is uploaded to the very expensive Lakeview, but soon finds himself under the thumb of his possessive, still-living girlfriend, Ingrid. As Nathan adjusts to the pros and cons of digital heaven, the bonds with Nora, his living customer service rep, or Angel. Nora struggles with the pressures of her job, her dying father who does not want to be uploaded, and her growing feelings for Nathan, spoiler alert, while slowly coming to believe that Nathan was murdered. There's a lot going on in this show. Overall, I like the show. I like this concept. I like this show. I laughed. It also made me think. Also made me scared. Gave me a lot of emotions overall. I really enjoyed it. I probably took a few days to watch this. Phil, what are your thoughts on the show?
I enjoyed it. I know you recommended it to me. I took a look at it and obviously binged the whole season there over a week. Bite-sized episodes. Great concepts, good comedy. Once I realized it was Greg Daniels, obviously I felt very comfortable in watching it. It also reminds me elements of this transhumanism, about altered carbon. There's been some other science fiction stuff that's out there that we're talking about the idea, Ghost in the Shell. A lot of this stuff about what is the actual soul, where does it reside, if it's digitized, what does it do? And then it just really hit me that you look at what Elon Musk is doing. He apparently owns part of a company that is looking to digitize the human mind and be able to upload it as well. So I think that this really hits on something that's it's becoming more and more of a hot topic in today's society.
Yeah, there was a joke in Friends in one of the episodes. It doesn't matter when, but where Ross was saying that in the year 2030, you will be able to upload your entire conscience and mind into a computer and essentially live forever. So it's kind of funny, like 20 plus years after the fact, here we are still thinking and talking about this. But I think we're kind of leaning more towards it kind of possibly being realistic as opposed to a far-fetched dream. Tyler, what are your initial thoughts?
On the show itself, so I want to stick on that before going too much of that. It feels very much to me like the spiritual cousin to The Good Place by Michael Schur, I believe. And the two of them worked on, I believe, both Parks and Rec and The Office together. So it's very much like they were drawing on similar ideas and going with it. So it seems like a nice little romp of, like you said, it's got science fiction in there. It's asking big questions and talking about some really heavy philosophical and technological questions. And then also has like comedy and drama and character stuff going on as well. So it's the best of all worlds on that side of it. To the more technological, Russia, a company out of Russia was saying they actually think they're gonna have this tech by 2033. I think, which I don't know.
And that's the date this takes place in. So.
Yeah, right. I'm like, that's. Yeah, I said that as I was thinking. I'm like, geez, oh no, time travel.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I specifically believe these specific claims. I mean, I think if you look at a lot of technology, we don't, as a species or a society, we're not great at projecting when technology is going to be mainstreamed. Like we figured out, let's say, like we figured out basically cell phones, like in the '60s with Star Trek.
Yeah.
But it took us a long time to really get cell phones.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's just like purely from a technological point of view. Let's talk a little bit about the society that they live in. They live in 2033. Apparently by 2033 we'll have full automated cars where you don't have to do anything. You just tell it to go wherever you want. It's like the ultimate Uber. We obviously, the whole idea of the afterlife, we have completely processed foods. We have, it's kind of like the technology we have today, but to the extreme. What do you feel, Phil, that this is actually plausible, that, we're kind of leaning in this direction of where they think that we will be by 2033?
It's undeniable how it's a parody on today's culture as far as extremes, because even the 2 gig thing, was just like the haves and the have-nots. It was such a discrepancy of class and whatnot, and just the whole setup of the Lakeview place where the people reside. And it's so, as you mentioned, it's exclusive. It's financially debilitating for most people to participate in it, and it really highlights what's going on in the world today. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and it explores that really uncomfortable space for the people who are reconciling that in everyday life. And I think more than the technology aspirations that it's trying to explore, it's exploring today's society, and it's really showing us stuff in an extreme so that we can start thinking about our own paths and how we choose to go down this route. Like, can we stop it before it gets that bad?
I love the fact that you just took it completely into exactly where I wanted to go. And that's kind of like the whole economic point of view of that, the has and the haves not. It's really, to me, it was really profound, and it's some of the subtle things. Like, I think when one of the scenes in the middle of the show, Nathan's sister was eating with the family of his girlfriend, and they made a comment about, hey, have you not had non-processed food ever in your life? Little jabs like that about the haves versus the have-not. The whole Lakeview and the afterlife, where you have this beautiful, majestic world where people can live with quote-unquote unlimited data. Versus people who have the limited data and they're kind of like in the bunkers in the basement, and it's just kind of like where we are in society today times 1,000. So to me, that was super interesting and really made me think a lot. The other thing I really thought made me laugh about this world that they live in is the sponsorships. So even large companies are being bought up by larger companies and being bought up by larger companies, where I forget exactly what the example was. It's been a few weeks since
Nokia, Taco Bell.
That's what it was. Yeah. Like it's we're not far from there. When AT&T owns DC Comics, like here we are in this world. We're not too far from that, where Facebook might bring us McDonald's tomorrow, for all that we know. So it's kind of this world. It's kind of like a dystopian world, but we're not too far from said dystopian world. Tyler, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that Phil hit the nail on the head there. I think that it also uses the metaphor of it being entirely digital. And hypothetically, there is no reason in a digital environment for there to be that discrepancy. It exists solely because there are societal pressures to do so. And there is the societal disinterest in any form of equality being enforced. There's, you can very easily argue that one of the major problems in our real world is a lack of distribution rather than a lack of having the resources. And in a digital world, that becomes that turned up to 1,000 of there is conceivably no reason not to just make more server space, more solar panels. And you reach this point where the marginal cost drastically approaches zero. And it should be post-scarcity, but they have to impose scarcity because there's no other way they know how to run a society.
Yeah. And, it's kind of like, again, this dystopian world. Like, for example, Nora's father is dying from what they called vape lung. We're actually, by this point in 2033, we're seeing the actual consequences of vaping. It's kind of like one of those things where, in the 50s, everyone was smoking, your children were probably smoking, and it was all good. It was even healthy for you. But years later, we found out the actual issues with it. And that's kind of where I stand with vaping. Is it safe? Maybe. We don't know. We are the test subjects. In 20 years, we're going to find out whether that, how safe or unsafe it is. So anyone who says it's healthier than smoking, keep telling yourself that. Wow, we're going to get a lot of hate this week. But, it's just... I love those little jabs that they put into the show that really should make you think about, where our future is heading. And it's really funny because, like, to a certain extent, this is a dystopian world, but it's so much closer to our world than, we perceive it to be when you consider the haves versus the have-nots, the corporate takeovers, self-driving cars and everything, and the good versus the bad of them. Like, guys, Phil, would you trust right now getting into a car saying go and it magically takes you without killing you?
No, not at all. And that was Google Cars in there. And I thought that was a funny little reference about where Google is headed with all this technology as well. My one big takeaway relating back to the dinner story with the little girl attending dinner with the rich people and eating the non-processed food was one of the comments or observations she made about their family dynamic was that she asked if they're always this mean to one another.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very subtle jab at, the rich people are very cutthroat. The poor people are more socially minded or whatever you're going to say, however you're going to spin it. But they're just more compassionate about one another or lead, what we would probably consider a nice life as far as how they treat one another. So I thought that there was some really interesting themes that were subtly being brought to the audience that I really appreciated the effort and maybe it goes over a lot of people's heads, but I just, I was making some notes and noting the Nokia Taco Bell and what is it, Facebook owning something else. Yeah. And it's just like Disney owning 20th Century Fox. Who would have thought?
Exactly. Yeah. It's crazy.
It is happening in our world. Right?
The other aspect that I really loved about this world, and we basically already there, and that's in regards to when they're in the afterlife, is constantly giving people those 5 stars, and they have the the Tinder-like app where you actually rate people after you do stuff with them, and we're so close to that. It's so scary. It's like that episode of Black Mirror. Where we're constantly just trying to appease people for that perfect rating, as opposed to actually being a good person. That was like one of the major takeaways for me. Go ahead, Tyler.
I mean, the Chinese government is already rolling that exact thing out, right? Like, it's the social credit system that China's been super excited for, which is basically the government running that exact thing of you can now rat out or prop up your neighbors about how good they fulfill their obligation to the powers that be.
Yeah, and you can only do certain things if you are a certain rating.
Yeah, I don't remember how. I know that's the plan. I don't remember how specifically all the different parts they've announced have been rolled out in practice, but it's terrifying.
It really is. Like, that is, to me, just scares me because, yeah.
But even to roll it into a more North American point right now, with the government talking about unveiling apps for social distancing and contact tracing and things like that. Like, there's this huge privacy nightmare on my behalf where I'm like, okay, you consent to it because it's good for you. And, let's say you go to the store and you come in contact with 4 people because you have to go get food. And one of those 4 people gets the disease, and then they let you know via an app or whatever, and they say, hey, you might want to look out for symptoms because you were at this place. But how that can be used for such nefarious purposes, by other elements of the government. And I'm not trying to be conspiracy minded, but it is a real major privacy thing. And privacy is non-existent in this upload world.
Yeah.
Everything, like, look at his funeral when they're showing random highlights and he's having sex with people that aren't his girlfriend and stuff like that. And there was no holds barred. Everything was there.
And it was so normal.
Yeah, I think you're... Go for it, Boris.
I was just saying how normal that was in their society, that it was just like another day in the park. Meanwhile, like, I'm thinking of my own life, and I would be... Look, whenever I go, I'm terrified of whoever has to clean out my computer and phone and all that. Like, power to you.
Yeah, it's been... even if it's not even a nefarious actor, even if it's just, we've seen a number of data leaks. Even if the government does everything perfect and no one uses it for any sketchy material in the government, we still are creating that data and those correlations. And all it takes is that to be leaked, and all of a sudden, they can know a lot about you if you know where you're going. And we say, like, well, if you have nothing to hide, who cares? It's like, well, what if I don't want people to know certain things about me,
And that's the thing.
Like, marijuana is legal in Canada, but it's not in the States. Do you want the American government to be able to know? And because theoretically, they've claimed they can stop you at the border if you've done something that's legal in your country.
Yep. Which is why I will never, ever, 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 ever buy marijuana from the stores. ... So I completely forgot where I was going to go with all of this. Phil, do you have anything else to say?
Hey, they are privacy concerns, and that's a really good point that Tyler brings up about the idea that even if they do it all correctly and to satisfy everyone's concerns about privacy, but there's ownership of that data. That data has to reside somewhere, and that data could be secure or not secure at any point in time. It's a real headache, but that goes for everything. You look at Facebook and Cambridge Analytics and everything like that. The history of a lot of these companies really make me worry about the future.
Yeah.
And it's a weird spot to be in because here we are in the present, right?
Yeah.
But shows like this just make you really think about it when there's absolutely no discretion. Like I just sat there and said, why wouldn't they look at a cut of this guy's life instead of just randomly throwing it up there? And I get that, that funeral brought to you by L'Oreal, was done probably in a half-assed way, and that was a comedic bit, but I don't know, the dramatic side of it was just really alarming to me. You know what I mean? Like, that I felt really bad for Nathan at that point. It wasn't a comfortable scene at all. Yeah, it's funny though.
It for sure brings up like the age-old question of who watches the watchers, right? Like, is anyone going to make sure that these companies are actually using these metrics, these data responsibly, and who actually enforces this? Like, there's so many questions. Even going back to your contact tracing, like the amount of information that these people are going to have on each and every single one of us, it's just absolutely insane to think of, and it scares me. Like, it's so there. I remember, like, one of my first jobs as a developer was creating metrics and reports for management, and you have to be really careful because managers want to see accountability and they want to see productivity. So I remember that I was naive and I thought the world was perfect back then, and I created this program that basically showed the productivity of people person by person. And I remember that my supervisor at the time, my team lead, said, "Hey, there's such a thing as good metrics and bad metrics. Is this something you really want to show to management at that level?" Going back to who watches the watchers, like, this is how much, there's just so much information that these people are privy to, and will they actually use this information responsibly? If history tells us anything, it's no. And that's not even a conspiracy theory type thing. It's like, we can look back and we are a very irresponsible society when it comes to privacy, when it comes to info, gathering and how we disseminate and actually use said info.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just
Well, the businesses are there to be in business, right? And Google knows all this stuff about us anyway, which is really scary in itself.
Yeah.
Because nothing's for free.
yeah,
That's the bottom line, right? And again, I'll go back to the show and pick out another theme that I saw, going back to the discrepancies of rich and poor and whatnot. You also had that whole idea that Nathan was working on with his partner, the free upload, right? Like you'd be able to get yourself uploaded, and the kind of demand that had. Then you have the dichotomy of Nora's dad, who just wants to pass away and be with his mom, right? Or be with his wife. He just wants to go to the afterlife, the proper human afterlife, and this is a complete society that's based its faith in technology. And there was a subtle little dichotomy going on there that the creators were bringing in. Maybe they explore in future seasons, I don't know. But those are all things that borrow heavily from Altered Carbon and a lot of other great science fiction. The Good Place, everything like that. It's an interesting kind of look at things.
Yeah.
It also really hammers home the tendency for advantages to compound. Like on the exact point you're talking about is like you said, it's so easy for, and this is jumping back a little bit, but talking about how you've only ever had processed food, and anecdotally, I living at home all the time, I'm buying better food here, and I feel better. It's better quality. And, if your chicken isn't stuffed full of extra water, a chicken breast lasts you 2 meals instead of one sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly
it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting world. A lot of interesting concepts that they were able to introduce in this one season. But I feel like, there's so much more room for this world to grow. As a viewer, it makes you think of stuff. Watching this show really made me think of how I want to spend my afterlife. And my afterlife would essentially consist of a podcast room where I can record podcasts and scare the shit out of everyone that's still living. Bill, how would you spend your afterlife?
It's a pretty big philosophical question for me. Like, would you want to live forever and be this person, improving, maybe not improving, maybe regressing in terms of your spirituality or your essence of being? Or do you take that gamble on, is there an afterlife, and going to that final spot? So show made me think about that a lot. I don't know where my opinion is on it yet. Hopefully I got a lot more time on this earth before I have to decide. But it certainly would be interesting to have the option of doing an upload, of being able to exist virtually. And it's interestingly enough, in that show, the big thing was trying to get that person to be able to be downloaded, right? Yeah. That was a big part of a theme that I think, again, they can explore later.
Yeah. And the perfect actor for that scene, Creed Bratton, that was hilarious. Tyler, how would you spend your afterlife?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I've long thought that, if we look at a longer, not less immediate, but the longer term challenges facing our species, a lot of them require solutions that are longer than a single lifetime. And we're talking about stuff here like not just colonizing Mars, but terraforming it. Or if we ever want to travel to the stars, if we ever want to do a lot of these things, those are probably impossible in a human lifetime.
Yeah.
And, if we're the only intelligent species out there, we functionally have unlimited resources out there in the entire universe. So, and I know the show hasn't gone there yet, but I think that, if we're capable of digitizing human beings and putting them into some sort of way they can directly interact with the world around them from their digital selves, I think it's just a matter of time before we end up, abandoning conceptions of what humanity is, and just all of a sudden it's like, no, you're a spaceship and you go out and you find new stars.
Yeah.
And that's all you do, and you're like, I can just go drift amongst the stars forever.
Like real life Transformers.
Exactly. We are all Transformers.
We are all Transformers. That's
how this ends.
That's my takeaway. We are all Transformers. That's the show episode. title, by the way.
It turns out the spark of leadership was inside us all along.
The hot, gooey spark of leadership all over someone's face.
Yeah, sure.
What? Oh my god, I'm losing it. Oh, man. No, this show really did, like, to Phil's point and Tyler's point, like, there's so much to actually think about when you think about your afterlife. And there's just so much ethical, moral things that come to mind when you start thinking about how would you want to spend your afterlife. Like, can you imagine, I guess the overpopulation would be a whole separate thing at that point. Can you imagine how many server farms we would have to build? How many, how often do you actually want to see these people that have passed away and, can literally show up anywhere? Like, there's so many questions. And as I'm watching and watch this show, these things always came to mind. Like, and then what happens if you get, like, the Vanilla Sky scenario and everything goes to shit and there was an issue in your actual upload? It's crazy. There's so many scenarios here. But this show is overall really intelligently done. I'm actually looking forward to more episodes down the road. I hope that they do get renewed and we do see, well, actually it was renewed, but we do see these episodes sooner rather than later. Who knows when things are actually going to be recording in the future. But, yeah, overall, I really like the show. It made me think. A show that is smart, the well-written, funny, emotional, and can get you thinking. That's always a positive show for me. Phil, any final thoughts?
Well, for me, the brilliance of the show is really how approachable it is. And that's key to getting that audience, because you're going to get people who are big fans of The Office and, past worker Greg Daniels. You're going to get them in there, but they're going to start thinking about this. And I think that's the brilliance of a show like this. It's not heavy-handed. It's fun to watch. You don't have to dwell in some of these philosophical debates or these ethical debates. It's just, good TV. I'm glad that they took the chance on it. And I'm hearing that a lot of the places in California, at least, are opening up next week for shoots. So we should see production starting on a whole whack of stuff going forward, as long as, we can keep all this stuff at bay.
Yep. Tyler, any final thoughts on Upload?
It's a good show. People should watch it.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much how I feel. So I guess, we will wait to see more episodes. I'm sure we'll talk about this and similar themes down the road as we talk about other things. So just a few things coming up. We are I don't want to say expanding, but like I mentioned so many times in the past, we are changing. We are more than just a comic book podcast. We are just a podcast about anything and everything, and it's all in canon, yada, yada, yada. But we will be talking about things and other fandoms than just Star Wars and Batman and, the usual stuff. We will be expanding. We will be having dedicated episodes to sports, to wrestling, to Harry Potter, to God knows what else. We might even do a Twilight episode in the summer with the new book coming out. I don't know. But, the sky is really the limit in terms of what we will be talking about. So I hope that, a lot of people enjoy what, this episode was a little heavy at times. I tried to kind of just, make jokes where I could and was appropriate. But, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe. Tyler, how about for old time's sake, you tell people how they can get a hold of us?
Oh, God. I warned you about this. We're on Spotify. We're on iTunes. We're on a bunch of places where you get your app-related stuff. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's all at It's Canon Podcast. That's where you find us.
Yep.
I got it all.
We got it all.
Yep,
you can find us everywhere. You can also find us on our website, www.itscanonpodcast.com.
That's what I was missing.
Yep, you can subscribe.
And you can email us at show@itscanonpodcast.com as well. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we're talking over each other. I think this is a perfect time for us to call it a Sunday. As always, thank you for listening. I had a blast talking to you guys. Tyler, it's honestly awesome having you back. Phil, always a pleasure talking to you. I'm your host, I'm Boris, and I was joined today by Tyler.
That's me!
And Phil.
It's me.
Thank you so much, everyone, and stay tuned to our channel because we will have another episode next week where we will talk about anything and everything because it's all in canon. Thank you.